and welcome back to HERstory. I'm Jonelle Goins. In today's episode, I have 5 leading ladies, and they have agreed to participate in a panel. Our panel discussion is entitled PWI versus HBCU, Academic Confidence and Racial Identity. I'd like to start out, let's go ahead and start our conversation. I'd like to start the discussion with an interesting question. I want to know from each of you, talk about the dynamics of the institution that you attended. If you attended more than one institution, tell me about that. And when I say the dynamics, tell me how it felt to be an African-American or Black woman. So Dr. Brown-McClure, let's start with you.
Hi, so thank you. I attended Jackson State University for my bachelor's degree, which is a historically Black college and university. I also attended Boston University for my master's degree, which is a predominantly white institution, and then the University of Texas at Austin for my doctorate. So as an undergrad at Jackson State, I don't think I have ever in my life been so fulfilled in my identity. So that was the first time for me being in a space where I was surrounded by other Black folks striving for the same thing. It was the first time that I had been in an academic setting where there were people who were teaching the academic content that looked like me, that had been through similar situations. And I really had an opportunity to see myself and the possibility in that space. I will say that was very different at the other 2 institutions that I attended, Boston University and the University of Texas at Austin, because I truly was a number, and it was about searching out where are those spaces where I can find folks who are like me. And even when I find them, do I fit in? Does this make sense? I'm not really sure where the safe space is for someone like me on this campus. It was very different in undergrad at an HBCU. It was the campus was your campus versus my experience in graduate school.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Dr. Brown-McClure. I had a similar experience at Alcorn State University. It did feel like that was your home to start with. Let's follow up with Dr. Coleman. Dr. Coleman, tell us about your university. Tell us about the experience that you had as an African-American or Black woman. How did it feel?
I am originally from Flint, Michigan.
Okay.
And I attended a predominantly white institution for undergrad. I attended Oakland University.
Okay.
It is located in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
And while being in undergrad, similar to Dr. Brown-McClure's experiences at predominantly white institutions, there was definitely a disconnect.
Okay. Talk about that.
There was a small population of Black students.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically knew one another because the population was so small. For graduate school, I attended Grand Valley State University, which is a predominantly white institution as well. Both of those institutions are located in Michigan, and they're also located in prominent white areas.
Okay.
And it was an adjustment even going to get food or going out. Unless you went to a Black sponsored event, you had to make adjustments in your behavior, the way you carried yourself.
Wow.
And your interactions with the populations within those cities.
Okay.
I was hired at Jackson State University in 2013 as the Associate Dean of Students, and I decided to pursue my PhD. And so my PhD was obtained at an HBCU. And going into an HBCU culture, I mean, it was amazing. I was like, when I arrived on campus, I was just like, wait a minute, I have been missing this all of my life. So to be able to see others who look like me, educating students who look like me, and that's not to say that there aren't other populations on an HBCU campus by any means, but of course these colleges and universities were established to educate Black people.
Right.
And so there's just a culture on an HBCU campus that cannot be compared to any other collegiate experience.
Right. All right. I'd like to follow up with Ms. Wallace. Ms. Wallace, would you give us insight to your experience?
Sure. First, I want to say thank you, Janelle, for inviting us all to the call. I feel so privileged to be here with all of you beautiful ladies. But my name is Eryka Wallace. I'm currently the marketing strategist at Clemson University. And all of my collegiate experience is from predominantly white institutions. So I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And honestly, I believe that the population reflected what the world actually looks like. And so the Black population was quite comparable to the United States population of Black identifying people. And so I had an opportunity to connect and with multiple groups, but it was very separate. Just to be honest, let's keep it real. It's Mississippi, right? So was separate, but I had a wonderful experience as a Black person, and I was very secure in my Black identity. In fact, my Black identity grew, like my comfort and my confidence in being a Black woman grew, because I had other people who didn't look like me, and I could be proud of that. So that was actually a really great experience. And then I went off and started working professionally in higher education, and so I actually obtained my master's degree from the University of West Florida, which is where I also worked previously. And so I really didn't have a student experience. I did night classes. And so, but the population was extremely different. And I mean, I think it's safe to say that there's some work to be done at some predominantly white institutions. And so even though I had a great personal experience as an undergraduate, working professionally and also obtaining a higher degree at another predominantly white institution, I can definitely see the difference. I'm grateful for my experience, and that's why I'm so passionate about being here and working in higher ed, so I can share the stories of everybody.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Let's follow up with Ms. Davis-Prince. Ms. Davis-Prince, tell us about your experience, where you went to school, how did it feel?
Yeah, so again, thank you so much for the opportunity. So my experiences were a little bit different. So my undergrad institution is Berea College, which is a small liberal arts institution in Kentucky. And so Berea was founded upon educating Blacks and whites together. So while Berea is not an HBCU, it's kind of thought of as a HBCU's cousin, if you will. And so I felt completely connected to my culture, to my Blackness, to my womanhood at Berea. I had a lot of professors that looked like me. I had a lot of staff members in high roles that looked like me that I could look up to and have conversation with and be mentored by. And so that experience was great. I became a student activist. I did a lot of work around Blackness and that I loved. But then I attended Eastern Kentucky University for my master's in higher ed, and that experience was completely different. And it was, for me, it was a rude awakening, right? And so Berea is nestled in this very, very small Appalachian town, and then Eastern Kentucky is in a city. And so the city life, I thought would be more progressive, and it wasn't. And so I was the only Black woman in my program. Wow. The only Black woman professor made it very clear on day one that she was not looking to build community with anyone at all, especially Black women. And so, like I said, it was a very, very rude awakening, but it was also at Eastern Kentucky that I gained more of my confidence in my Blackness, and in being a Black woman in this space and asserting myself. And I am continuing my doctoral work, fingers crossed, will be finished in December at Xavier University in Louisiana. And I think this experience is a little bit more unique, mainly because I was a professional staff member there for about 6 years before I started my doctoral work. And so my experiences integrating into being a doctoral student is a little bit different because I work there professionally and I have personal relationships with most of the professors. But again, my experience at Xavier has been very affirming in my Blackness. Most of my research and my conversations with folks is around being a Black woman and being leading in these spaces. And so I think I have been intentional about doing that. And I think it's been great. I think all of the institutions have kind of really shown me who I am, and allowed me to be who I need to be.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Davis Prince, and good luck to you and your doctoral program. We're going to claim that, yes, you will be done in December, and we'll be calling you Dr. Davis Prince. We sure will. All right. So let's move on to Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown, if you would tell us about your experience as a Black woman at your institution or institutions.
So, like everyone else, thank you again, Janelle, for being a part of this. I am originally from Cleveland. So for me, going to a Black institution as an undergrad was essential. I just had to do that. So I did do my undergrad at Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio. It's definitely a different experience as an HBCU in the Midwest compared to an HBCU in the South. Okay. But nonetheless, I felt embraced. I always had an awareness of my Black identity no matter what. And on that campus, it was welcomed, it was nurtured, it was definitely cultivated in various ways. So the campus alone allowed me to further dig deeper into who I was as a Black person. You have faculty who literally fed into you in every capacity whatsoever. My classmates were all, we could tell we were all there to figure out more about who we were as people, as a Black community, as part of the Black diaspora or African diaspora. So that overall experience was like, I felt connected even more. And it also didn't really help that I had been exposed to that campus as an 8th grader through an alum. So I had connections from 8th grade through high school to alumni of the institution that definitely helped support more my interest in the institution. I ended up doing my master's at Concordia University in Portland, where I also started my doctoral studies in 2017. And it was a private faith-based institution. And mine is a little bit different. My program was 100% online. So I wasn't physically on campus, but you definitely could tell that there were conversations in the class setting that I really wanted to talk about. We were talking about education from higher ed to K through 12, and things were happening in our society at that time where I'm like, we should be talking about these things and how they're impacting our students, specifically our students of color, our at-risk underserved students. Like, how are we having this and how are we developing educators? And there were several moments where I've had faculty who were like, that's not part of the curriculum, so we can't discuss those things. So it was a reminder of like, yeah, we know these things are an issue, but it's not important enough for us to bring this into the class setting for us to help learn from each other. So that was where I was like, okay. And I started recognizing, one, in my master's program, I was the only African-American in the program. So even then, I'm also talking about education and higher ed from a HBCU setting, and no one understood what I was talking about. So I'm like, I'm the only person talking about HBCUs. I'm the only Black person. And then you're having these spaces where I'm like, we should be preparing each other for the young people that we're going to be impacting in some capacity. And it wasn't welcome. So it was very interesting to be in one setting as an HBCU student, and that's been my career as well, is working at HBCUs, and you're seeing how your identity is embraced and welcome and want to actually navigate through or talk about the different things that we experience. And then here I am in a professional setting, in a master's program, and in the start of my doctoral program, and we're being urged to not discuss certain things that are impacting our society. So that was the very interesting dynamics between the two institutions.
Wow. Thank you, ladies, for sharing. And you all are thanking me for having you on HERstory. I want to thank you all for agreeing to be on HERstory. You all are all leading ladies in your own right, in your own area. And it's just a privilege to have you on this show. I'd like to, first off, I didn't say, but good evening to each of you. And thank you all for sharing your experiences as an undergraduate, as a graduate, and some as a doctoral student. So I'd like to give a little context to our viewers between HBCU and a PWI. Access to higher education is growing. So now it's no longer a privilege to go to college the way it was when higher education first came about, when the Harvards and the Princetons were first coming up. It's now a right. So everyone has the right to go to college. Everyone has the right to choose whether or not they want to go to a private institution or a public institution or a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution, or an HBCU, which is a historically Black college or university. And as you've heard so far, all of our participants are all graduates of an institution, and most have attended both an HBCU and a PWI, or an HBCU's cousin. That was very unique, Miss Davis Prince, but I am appreciative of that experience too. So by show of hands, ladies, can you tell me how many of you had to develop a coping mechanism as a result of being at your institution, regardless if it's at a PWI or at an HBCU? Did you develop some sort of behavior in order to just make it there, in order to not stick out, in order to fit in? So by show of hands. So everyone had to do that, okay? All right, so let's talk about that. I want to uncover where you did that and why you did that. Ms. Wallace, let's start with you.
Sure. So I went to PWI as an undergrad,
Right.
and my biggest cope was finding community. And it's really easy. It was really easy for me to find community because the Black community at Southern Miss is very strong and we're not monolithic at all. So every type of Black person, or many types of Black people, are at Southern Miss or were at Southern Miss when I was there. And they were loud and present. And I don't mean loud vocally. I just mean like available, like physically able for me to see. So my number one cope was just getting connected. And that's what we did immediately. It was something that was highly encouraged. Like some others said, there were so many prominent people, including you, Janelle, who were in roles at Southern Miss. So it was easy to find mentorship. So honestly, being connected with student organizations and then finding some mentors, not like huge coping for me.
Got it. Would anyone else like to add a different type of coping that Ms. Wallace talked about? Any sort of different, not a piggyback, but a different type of coping mechanism that you used while you were at a PWI or an HBCU?
I can jump in. I would say one of the things that I kind of reckoned with as I left Xavier was that my coping mechanism at my HBCU was a little bit different. And so being someone that had historically only worked at a PWI, when I came into the space of working with a whole bunch of Black folks, I was extremely excited, right? And I was extremely trusting because I felt like people that look like me will do right by me. And so my coping mechanism originally was everybody's your friend. Everybody, everyone is going to help you, and everyone has your best intention or student's best intention at heart. And I soon realized that was not true. And so for me, I started to cope by kind of putting up walls and putting up barriers, which were necessary in the space, but also allowed me to see people for who they were, which then allowed me to navigate spaces a little bit more smart and better. So I think kind of, a little bit different, understanding, Eryka, what you're saying, but I think for me at a HBCU as a staff member, it was a little bit different.
Right. I can believe that. Zora Neale Hurston said it right. What did she say? All skin folk ain't kinfolk. All right. So any other experiences that are different that can add enrichment to that question? Any coping mechanisms that we used in order to make it at a different university?
I would say for me,
let's go ahead with Dr. Brown-McClure. Forgive me.
So for me, the experience occurred at a PWI. I did not find the community that I needed in my master's program initially. So I had moved from a completely different part of the country. I'm originally from Texas, did undergrad in Mississippi. That kind of Southern culture and experience was very different from moving to Boston. And so I was not finding what I needed on campus, which is what I was used to. And so for me, the coping mechanism was finding other spaces. And so I spent a significant amount of time in the actual city and finding my groups and my connections in the city. I'm a member of a sorority, and so I had to invest in a different way. In my alumni chapter of my sorority, I found ways to connect again to that community that was very different from the institution that I went to and that I attended classes in. But that for me was the way that I coped, because I found my connections and my strength outside of the institution.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Did you have any interactions at all with your master's environment, with the students there, or was your engagement only with the city?
I went to class, and there was another student of color in my program, and we actually lived in a similar area. So the institution itself is in a predominantly white area. And I made a very conscious decision to live in the predominantly Black area of Boston. For folks who don't know, Boston's extremely segregated, even today. And so I was intentional about where I lived. It just so happened that my classmate also lived in that area. And so we were close. But outside of that, I would come in to do what I needed to do academically, and I was out as soon as I could get out. So my engagement really was with the community.
Wow. That's interesting. All right. Let's see. Dean Coleman, it looked like you had some contributions for us.
Yes, I first wanted to apologize because I don't know that I followed directions with the first question, and I don't know that I actually gave my graduate institution for my master's program. I did.
You did. I think you introduced all of your institutions that you went to. You went to Grand Valley State, right?
Okay, I did. Yeah, you did. So in comparison to Oakland University and Grand Valley State, I found that I was often the only Black person in my classroom. And so there were times, depending upon what we may be discussing, where I was asked to be the spokesperson for Black people. And I just recall being in a conversation in one of my sociology classes in undergrad, because that was my major. I remember letting my professor know I can't speak on behalf of all Black people. Right. I can only speak from the lens of my lived experiences. And so even going into my graduate program, I was one of two in my cohort of women who identified as Black. And our cohort ranged from 25 to 30 people. And so just going through that academic process, for a short period of time, we had a Black woman as a faculty member, but for the most part, they were white professionals. Right. And so that was a major adjustment for me, coming from a predominantly Black city, and then having to adjust to being in an environment where I was the only Black person or person of color in the room, and having to adjust to how I responded to certain things.
Wow. Well, that is an interesting experience. Did your professors ever learn to accept that there were more than just one type of Black student, or more than just one type of Black person?
That's a good question. I don't think I really have the answer, because I truly never addressed the concern. I just pushed through. But it was something that helped me to grow as a leader. Right. Just in how I responded to certain things.
I understand. I do. I understand. I think all of us have been in that, probably have been in that spot one time or another in our careers, or just in life. So I want to know on the academic confidence side, and for our viewers, academic confidence is more along the lines of how comfortable are you engaging in class? How apt are you to integrate into the academic portion of your experience? Right? How many of you all felt that you were apt to participate in class? That's what I want to know. So show of hands. At your undergraduate institution, you were apt to participate in class, okay? All right, how many of you all, let's keep our hands up, how many of you all felt that your professors were supportive of you, meaning that your professors saw your plight and wanted to help you out? And when I say your professors, let's say more than 5 in your whole undergraduate experience. So, all right, good deal. How many of you all, keep your hands up, how many of you all felt that your professors would be willing to mentor you as a student? And that means more than 5 of your professors. Okay, all right. All right, so let's talk about why and which institutions did you not feel, because some hands went down, at which institutions did you not feel that you had that complete gamut of support? So you'd participate in class, you would give, your professors cared about you, but they would not follow through and see you through. As professors, that is one of our responsibilities. We do have a service component as a professor. We do need to mentor and to advise. So tell me why you felt that. Let's go ahead. Dr. Coleman, tell us about that.
I never connected with faculty from a mentoring standpoint in undergrad.
Okay.
It was more so staff members. And so from that aspect, I did not have not one faculty member who reached out. I didn't connect with any of my faculty members to even ask them or think about asking them to serve as a mentor. In graduate school, I can say I was actually able to connect with one Black faculty member. One was male and one was female, and they were very open and welcoming. And so that made 2 from your criteria. I didn't get quite to 5. However, in my PhD program, being at an HBCU, all of my faculty members identified as Black.
Yeah.
And so it was a totally different experience. And so in every course, I felt supported.
Yeah.
I felt that I could go to them at any time, and they helped me through the entire process.
Yeah.
And so it was a totally different dynamic, and I just appreciated the family atmosphere being at an HBCU because it was totally different from my previous experiences.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Eryka, would you like to contribute? I saw your hand went down.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was definitely less than 5, so that's why I had to put my hand down. I think that it's an important note to say that there's a significant gap between, especially at predominantly white institutions, there's a gap of Black identifying professors versus Black identifying staff, right? And so though I did have great mentors who were on the staff side, I didn't necessarily see them in the classroom. And not five or more for sure. And so I really didn't find, like my place in the academic space, especially as an undergraduate. I found my space everywhere outside the classroom.
Yeah.
And there's many students who get through school that way.
Right.
I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just a reality. And so, yeah, I struggled academically because I didn't feel safe or supported. So. But I thrived everywhere else.
I know you did. I remember you did, and you're still thriving. One thing that I want to talk about for our viewers, the juxtaposition between a PWI and an HBCU, if I didn't say it before. An HBCU, well, historically Black colleges and universities were founded to specifically educate African Americans. It was not until the 1950s, by and large, you had a few cases that were, that were extraneous. But for the most part, African Americans were pushed to HBCUs if they did want to obtain a degree. It wasn't until the 50s that they could go to a PWI and obtain a degree. It started out basically in football. When we were found to have talent, and then we were allowed to come, and then the doors opened. There were a few cases of, there were many cases of integration that were, troublesome, but the door started to open more and more along the lines of, letting more and more students in. Before we go, I have one more question. I'd like to know, has going to an HBCU or a PWI forced you to want to prove your Blackness more? And the reason why I ask this is because I see a lot of new alumni shirts. And while I may purchase an alumni shirt that says Alcorn State University alumni, or Southern Miss alumni, or MC alumni, I see a lot of Black alumni shirts, or I see a lot of, just professing I'm Black. Does it make you want to profess your Blackness more as a result of having gone to a certain type of school? Do you feel like you have to prove that? All right, let's start with you, Ms. Brown.
So I think for me, it's a celebration of HBCUs. So it's not necessarily me celebrating or prove my Blackness per se. It's me celebrating and proving the relevancy of historically Black institutions. That's where I do this at, because we still have that narrative of whether or not HBCUs are relevant. Are they still needed? Should we still have them? So for me, it's pushing, and it's also proving that our education is quality. Our education is rigorous. Our education is important. It's validating our education. I think us having Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, it's that additional affirmation to prove we've done it in various ways. There's a number of us from historically Black institutions who are successful in various ways, but to have her and always making reference that she is a graduate of a historically Black institution, it further affirms that we did not create these institutions just in vain. We created them to actually educate and provide educational access for Black Americans of descendants of slaves, for us to succeed. So the celebration is more so to prove to the world, one, yes, I went to a HBCU. I'm a product of an HBCU. My career has been always at HBCU for the most part. But yes, we are highly intelligent. We are highly qualified. We're highly capable. We are more than willing and more than deserving to be in any space, in any capacity. So it's more so letting you know, yes, all of this that you get, this greatness that you receive, is a product of a historically Black institution. It just so happened that all of my master's and doctorals degree will come from a PWI, but I started off. The HBCU birthed me, prepared me for that academic rigor to go elsewhere.
All right. If we could have one more short contributor and then we'll wrap up. Ladies, I want to thank you for being on this panel. Anyone else, would you like to contribute to this question of do you feel that it's necessary to prove your Blackness as a result of going to a specific type of institution, be it HBCU or PWI? I think specifically I'd like to hear from Ms. Davis Prince.
Okay, I can jump in. So I would say no, I don't feel the need to prove my Blackness ever. I agree with Ms. Brown in that it's more so of a pushing towards the understanding that the relevance of HBCUs is necessary. I think that in every space that I'm in, I work to change the negative narrative around HBCUs that I think is consistently perpetuated. And so I agree in that I feel like my Blackness does not need to be proved to anyone, but the relevance and the necessity and the need to go to HBCU, I think is something that I talk about all the time. For me, it was very important that I received my doctoral degree from an HBCU, just because I felt like, it was necessary to show folks that doctors graduate from HBCUs as well.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, once again. Ladies, after every show, I encourage our viewers to remember their powers. Walk in it, own it, be it. Here's to ladies everywhere. May we empower them, may we inspire them, and may we be them. I'm Dr. Jonelle Goins, and this has been Her Story in Higher Education.